Thank you so much for being here this evening. It's wonderful to have you here. This is the first time we have tried to do something like this, and we are super, super excited about this brand new series, Caring for the Caregivers. We intend to do more of these, so hopefully they will continue to grow, and we will continue to have our friends join us, hopefully. So before I introduce to you our panel of experts, I would like to make an announcement that we're definitely going to be taking questions from you guys. So please, please, please participate. And here's how that's going to work. On your tables, you will notice that you have some really remarkably cool looking pens that say Fundamental Arts Foundation on them. Those are yours to keep. If you don't end up getting the color you want, don't worry, we have plenty more. You just tell me what color you want, we'll make sure you get one. If you want one of every color so that you can give them away to your friends, let us know that too. So you also have some index cards there in the center of your table. What we would like for you to do is, as we are enjoying the evening, is write your questions. Yes, we're asking you to write. I know that's tough in this day and age when everybody's doing this. Write your question on the card, raise your hand. We have two lovely young people who happen to be on the board of directors for the Fundamental Arts Foundation, Taylor and Chad, and they're going to come to your table and get that card from you so you don't have to do anything but just let them know you've got it. They're going to put it in my basket, and I'm going to read that card. So please, if you can, try to write as legibly as possible. Although I do know how to read things like Klingon and Arabesh, stuff like that, and Elvish, I should be okay. But anyway, so yeah, just a big nerd, like half the people here, I know. So without further ado, I would really like to introduce our panel to you. And we are, first of all, very, very, very appreciative that you guys have given up your Sunday evening to be here with us. I like to think of it, though, as you haven't really given up anything as so much as you have gained, because now you know us. So, hey, it's a win-win. All right, so I'm going to introduce them from left to right, because as I was just talking to Chad about, right, that's how we naturally think. That's our psychology, at least here in the Western world, unless you're left-handed maybe, or, I don't know, read Hebrew. Okay, first here on your left, we have Jason Vinocur. And I told I pronounced that correctly because Mo taught me how. He is a board-certified behavioral analyst with Behavioral Innovations who specializes in assisting families with children who have autism. Is that a proper? Good. And next to Jason, we have Tammy Mahan, and Tammy is the Chief Executive Officer for LifePath Systems. Now, LifePath Systems is Collin County's designated community behavioral health and intellectual disability center. She has a master's degree in counseling from Midwestern State University and is a licensed professional counselor. She began her career at LifePath Systems in 1995. Over the years, she's held multiple programmatic and management positions at LifePath, including Director of Behavioral Health and Chief Operating Officer. She stepped into the CEO role in February of 2020, just before the start of the current pandemic. She's a member of the McKinney Noon Rotary Club and the Homeless Collaborative for Dallas and Collin counties. Next to her is Dr. Wayne Braudrick, whom I know many of you here know, but I'm still going to tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Braudrick is a professor, author, and pastor. He's also father of Michael Braudrick, the founder of the Fundamental Arts Foundation. In the 9 years since Michael's diagnosis, Wayne has experienced nearly every emotional swing and faced many of the struggles common to those who care for the mentally needy. As Wayne likes to say, I may not have many answers, but I do share care and cookies, as you can see. Thank you to Rose Wilms for the cookies tonight, by the way.
Those are good.
All right, at the other end over here, we have Jillissa Cherepon. Now, Jillissa serves as both the lead therapist and a management team member for HopeWorks. Her philosophy of counseling involves the integration of Christianity and psychology, and her areas of expertise include adolescent issues, trauma, grief, anxiety, and mood disorders, family conflict, and chronic illness. Jillissa is a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary, Dallas Baptist University, and Focus on the Family Institute with studies in marriage and family. So please welcome our panel with a huge. Now, don't forget, as I said, I have just a very few questions to start us off, so it is essential that you get to writing those questions down that you have, or else this is going to be a super short evening, okay? So I will begin. First of all, anybody on the panel that would like to start, just raise your hand, okay? And then we'll kind of maybe cherry pick who we want to answer certain questions. Oh, you got something else first?
Yeah, I got something to start with.
Okay, wonderful.
This was fascinating to me. This came out 2 days ago.
I'm going to go back here.
Loneliness, anxiety, and loss, the COVID pandemic's terrible toll on kids. It's a very long, in-depth article, appeared in the Wall Street Journal and in Psychology Today. It'll be in Psychology Today next week. It starts with the story of this one girl named Victoria, and I just want to just listen to this. This is why it's so hard to care for and love people who are struggling with mental issues of all kind, as we all do, but especially during the pandemic. Listen to this. Victoria's middle school shut down last spring, then reopened in the fall, but she grew anxious about catching the virus there. It goes on to say that her anxiety grew even though the numbers began to show more and more that the odds were very low. She turned to social media for solace, and to stave off boredom. She gave herself makeovers, posted the results on TikTok. She cut her bangs, then added a pink streak to her hair, then added 4 new ear piercings she did with a safety pin. She shaved part of her head. As the months piled up, she found it hard to stay motivated to do her schoolwork. Her grades have started falling again. Every day's exactly the same, she says. You feel like, what's the point? All right, just one more part from this article, just to understand why we're here. Harvard University researchers have been following 224 children, ages 7 to 15. They found that about 2/3 of them had clinically significant symptoms of anxiety and depression. The same number, 65%, had behavioral problems such as hyperactivity and inattention. This is between November 2020 and January 2021. You want to know what the numbers were exactly 1 year before that? November of 19 to January of 2020? The numbers were 30% with anxiety instead of 66%, and 20% with behavioral problems instead of 65%. Symptoms were more common in children who'd experienced losses such as having a family member hospitalized or dying from COVID, or a parent losing a job, which is very significant numbers. The biggest driver of child well-being during COVID is how the parents, their caregivers, are functioning. So that's why we're here. It's not just for you, it's for the people for whom you care. If you would like a copy of this article, it is low on answers, but it's great on information, and I've got it here. All right, so AJ, that was just something I bumped into recently, and now you can hit us with your question.
That's a perfect opening because we are here under the title of Caring for the Caregiver, Mental Health, and the Pandemic, which obviously is a reality of all of our everyday lives. So I think this is a great question to begin with, since it is caring for the caregiver. The question is, I think it would be interesting to hear more about caring for oneself when you are a caregiver to others. So self-care when you're a caregiver to others. Okay, Jillissa, you've been volunteered.
Thank y'all for letting me be here tonight. I think that's such a great question because self-care is so essential. And God talks about that a lot in the Bible of taking a Sabbath in the work week. And I think that's a really great example for all of us to know that we can't do it all. And so I think understanding your limits and that you can't be everything to everybody. And so I think that's really helpful to kind of look at what your stress level is as the caregiver and what your level of burnout is. There's a lot of different terms out there like secondary trauma. You know, when you have people that have been exposed to trauma and they're affected in such a negative way that you can be traumatized as well by listening to all of that. And so depending on what the person that you're caring for is going through. And there's also something called compassion fatigue, which is a very real thing. And as a counselor, I felt that a lot, but it's when you are constantly faced with hearing people's stories and such difficulties that you can kind of desensitize yourself or start struggling with just the various difficulties that you're dealing with. And so self-care is so important. I think the important thing is to look at yourself as a person. There's a really good acronym out there of person, and the P stands for physical. So understanding what your physical limitations are, making sure you're not drinking excessively, using substances to try to cope, limiting nicotine, limiting caffeine, making sure that you are balanced with the exercise that you're giving your body, drinking enough water, going to sleep. I think just all of those on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, making sure your physical needs are taken care of. The E in person stands for emotional, so making sure your emotional needs are cared for. As a counselor, I recommend counseling, being able to talk to somebody, making sure that you have resources and people that you can count on, and be able to process what you're going through. And I think especially with the pandemic, there's been so much happening that is a lot to wrap your mind around and to process. And so whether it's with somebody or journaling, just doing different things so that you can get a handle on how you're handling everything going on. And then, let's see, where am I? The R is for relational. And so understanding your relationships. Obviously, when you're stressed out, it's going to affect the people that you are in relationship with. And so with your kids, if you notice that you're getting a little bit more irritable, testy, your threshold's less, it's just really important to understand how you're being affected. So realize how it's going to affect your relationships at work, with your husband, with your in-laws, just anyone living with you, that sort of thing. And so making sure that you get the care that you need for that. Where am I? S. The spiritual component is huge, right? And as believers, we all know that. I think I personally found that with politics and with the world changing and just so much happening, that's a lot for a lot of us to go through. It's a huge adjustment. And if we're not clinging to God and to Scripture and being surrounded by people that can speak truth into our lives, whether that's reading your Bible and making it to church. I know a lot of people feel unsafe to get to church. It's so important to make sure that your spiritual walk is sound. And I know Pastor Braudrick, and there's a lot of resources here, and I also have a lot of other resources for that. The O is for occupational, so not necessarily your occupation or your job, but making sure that you have occupation in this. So stability, making sure that you feel a sense of just what you're doing day to day. I think with your article, if she felt bored and restless, making sure that you have just things that you can live for. So I think that's helpful. Not healthy distractions, healthy things to work out. And then even coping with projects, right? Kind of putting some of that negative energy into something that could be useful for the world. And then the last is, where am I? Person, and which is your needs. So understanding what your needs are and making sure that you can get those met. I think the first thing is just assessing what your needs are and what your feelings are, accepting them, and then being able to do something about it. And so that's just really important to know what your needs are, and don't be afraid to get help. Set goals for yourself. Can be really helpful. Cool. It's a long-winded answer, but
no, that's very helpful.
I think that's helpful for self-care.
No, that's wonderful. Love the acronym. Anybody else like to chime in on that question? Feel free.
I would just add to think of it kind of like they tell you on the airlines, that it's important to take care of yourself first before you can take care of your children or anybody else that depend on you. Because a lot of times I'm a mother and I work, and so we convince ourselves we have to do it all and we have to do the best. And a lot of times it's okay to just think, hey, what do I need right now so I can be just as good for my kid tomorrow and the next day, and make that a priority. So that, and that's a way to justify so you don't feel selfish in your head.
And I really like the way they do it on Southwest, where they say, while you're screaming and terrified when the masks fall down, put the mask on your own face. It's so true. I just love the reality of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on everything that you guys were saying. I agree 1,000%. We're not going to be able to provide the best quality of service to those that actually need the service if we're struggling with all sorts of, things inside our head as well. So you definitely have to take care of yourself first, but it's important to be mindful. I like to throw that word around a lot, and I'm probably going to throw it around a lot more tonight, so get used to it. So definitely have to take care of yourself first, and doing so, you will be able to provide the highest quality of care for those that actually need it.
one of our pastors had a dad in recently, just a couple weeks ago, and they were visiting about a problem with the kid in this family, and a severe, difficult problem, and the pastor thought they were getting together to talk about the kiddo, which is great, but it turns out the guy looked at our pastor and he said, I realized, and I don't know how I didn't notice it, but I've been for the last 2 years absolutely self-medicating. I'm an alcoholic. And the pastor said, okay, what are you going to do about that? So he had an idea that he, having dealt with his needs wrongly, and maybe you guys can relate to this, he should not address them at all. And the pastor was very gently able to say, that really isn't a solution. You don't just buck up and get tougher. It's great that you're going to celebrate recovery, and that's fine, but you need to also see a doctor, and you need to take some medicine that's healthy for you, because there's an in-between there. You can't just pretend that you don't need help. If your arm, this is the example we use most often, if your arm is broken, are you just going to pray for it? You better pray for it. If you're a believer, that would be the most important thing you can do. But is that all you're going to do, or are you going to go get it set by a doctor? Right? So if your brain's broken, if there's chemicals that aren't there or are there and shouldn't be there, certainly pray. It's the most important thing you can do. And then take care of yourself and take the medicine. And one of the tip-offs when you're not taking care of your own needs is you're feeling that, but you're filling it with something bad. Almost always. I mean, really bad, like television. So, I'm kidding, but there are people addicted to TV. Yeah, that's right. Unreality TV, that'd be the ultimate example. Yeah, check yourself in tomorrow if you, no, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Okay, Tammy, I think this would be a good one for you to lead off with. All right, if someone is working with children or youth on a temporary basis, like as a volunteer or chaperone, something like that, and they realize or suspect that someone is, now this was a new term to me, but I'm sure you understand it, neurodiverse. There's something going on there, not quite right. But you don't know their diagnosis, you don't know if they have been. What can you do, two things, to help them feel more comfortable, and then what should be kind of some of that follow-up after that?
Well, hopefully, maybe it was discussed at the beginning that if certain things come up, you talk to the parents. We do a lot, that's part of our informed consent. If you're talking softball or something where it's not even an idea, I would start by talking to the adolescent. Who's their support? Who have you talked to? Who have you tried to reach out to? Who are you comfortable reaching out to? What's preventing you from reaching out to, say, your parents or another adult? And just open that dialogue, because one of the myths is that talking about mental health or suicide it's not going to make them go commit suicide. That's just a myth. And so if you can't talk about it, then they're getting the message that it's bad. I can't, we shouldn't talk about it, and I should be even more quiet, and I just have to deal with this. So just opening the dialogue. Kids can talk to you, and they probably want to talk to you. If they've got some symptoms that they're showing, they, for the most part, would probably be very welcome. There's actually a training program we're doing that's just launching in schools called Teen Mental Health First Aid, where we also teach other teens how to talk to teens, because a lot of times they're not coming to one of us. They're coming to their peers, or they're telling their best friend through Snapchat videos or whatever. And so it's really important that we also prepare other teens to listen to and know how to respond to their friend when their friend says something.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Anybody else want to share? Please feel free. If not, I'll just move on to the next question. That's great. Okay, wonderful, helpful. Okay, when expressing to people that you care for someone that is mentally ill, how do you respond or cope when those people respond to that in a negative way? Wayne.
Well,
like you've never experienced that.
I've never experienced that. I can't imagine. There are two basic responses that are negative, but are very well intentioned. One tends to come only from religious communities, and especially from the theistic communities. Islamists, Christians, and Jews are most likely to give this reaction, and that is, oh my goodness, what is spiritually missing? Why have you not cast out this demon, or why have you not, it's from a really good place, but they don't recognize the incredible guilt they're putting by saying that, oh, this actually must, and by the way, it's really not a spiritual issue. The person saying it thinks it is. It's a control issue. If I can make this something that you can handle and make go away by following the right formula, then you're in control. And when you have mental illness in your life, you're not in control. So nobody is. And so they're intending well, but they're just asking you to assume God's role and be in control. So, for example, let's say Jillissa is in my care, and she has bipolar disorder. And somebody at church comes up and says, well, why, you've prayed for her, why hasn't that gone away? And I like to say, well, demonization's real, biblically. I believe so. I appreciate that input. That's really helpful. But the Lord has not chosen to have this go away. And her neurons are still misfiring in an interesting way. And that seems to be the way her brain has been since the end of puberty, which is when bipolar disorder shows up. And so we're managing it with all these kind of things. Normally, the person is like, oh, okay. And then I'm able to gently say, the reason you wanted that to happen may have a little bit less to do with the fact that you care, and a little bit more with the fact that you're uncomfortable and out of control. And it reminds me of an old Bugs Bunny cartoon where the bird, what was the name? The evil little yellow bird that I always wanted the cat to eat. Tweety Bird. Tweety Bird is inside. Sorry, did I just expose my own mental illness there that I didn't like Tweety Bird? Tweety Bird is inside, and the cat that was trying to eat him is outside, and it's freezing cold. And then the cat is dying. He's blue and dying. And the bird says, oh, I can't stand to see him like that. So he closes the blinds. It's just perfect. And that's really what we're doing when we try and pretend that we can wave. And by the way, just to make it clear, that's really not part of Islam or Judaism or Christianity. That's paganism. Paganism is all about you do the right formula and you make the God do the thing you want the God to do. And that's what paganism is, and it's a lie. The second is from a good place, really, and that is the person who feels that they feel that your kid or your father or whoever it is you're caring for is grandstanding. And that one sometimes is true. Sometimes the person is grandstanding. They really are, look at me. Oh, I'm so sick. Look at me, look at me. It's a little bit like if you have a friend who is, okay, I'm going to say this even though you are not this way, but I'm looking at one of my friends who has to be gluten-free for health purposes, okay? But have you ever had the person who is gluten-free and they want to make sure the entire world knows it, right? I mean, you take one bite of bread and they lecture you for 3 hours about the evils of gluten, right? Okay, that's what sometimes can happen with the person who is mentally struggling. They are crying for... So that one I give a little bit different answer. I really, again, both times I appreciate the input and the care, but in that one I say, okay, what are the signs? What are you seeing that you think that's happening? Because that's not healthy for them. That's not real care. That's fake care. That's look at me, still being in control, still trying to manage. And then maybe I get into a conversation with the person who brings it up about the difference between just being different, and it does attract attention sometimes, and grandstanding, and how much I appreciate their help in dealing with it. Does that make sense? So I'm just curious, of all the different mental issues we deal with, the people that you love, and you may have more than one in your life you get to care for, I'd like you to think of just one. Pick one person, okay? How many of you, that one person, is likely to actually try to hide? They're going to try to hide their disability. How many of you, that's what you deal with in the person you care for? All right, yeah. How many of you, the person is more likely, whether they want to or not, the nature of their disability or their personality is they're going to be flamboyant and act out and get attention? Okay, all right. So that one's not quite as common, but it does happen. So those are the two I run into.
Cool.
Sorry, so long.
Jason, all right, so I know you deal with caregivers pretty much on a daily basis, probably. What are some tangible ways to support the caregivers that may be in our lives?
Can I just go back to what he was saying a second ago? Yeah, I wanted to add that I think awareness is definitely part of the puzzle. You know, a lot of people are afraid of things that they don't understand, and I think it was autism maybe 80 years ago. It didn't just show up around 10 years ago. It just didn't get invented. Someone said, hey, look, autism, let's go spread this around or whatever. That didn't happen, by the way. I made that up. But it was like childhood schizophrenia, I think, 80 years ago. Nothing's changed, it's just that people are more aware of it now. So if there's something that people are afraid of, or they believe there's some kind of stigma behind it, I just think it's a lack of awareness and understanding of what the individual is going through.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah.
So
And then, what was the other question?
Yes, well, the other one's what's some tangible ways that people can support the caregivers in their lives?
So, that's a pretty long answer right there. I mean, there's lots you can do. Me personally, I take into account the parents. The parents do so much. You know, they go to work all day. A lot of the parents I deal with, they're single parents, and I could only imagine. We deal with a lot of problem behaviors. You know, they're working all day, then they come home to having to deal with long durations of aggression and tantrums, and more than likely they're going to do something to make that behavior stop. And in the long run, it actually ends up reinforcing that behavior. So, I think we've all been there. Not me, I don't have kids, but the kid's crying for some reason, and you do something to make that behavior stop. Well, it's great for in the moment, but long term, guess what? They're going to keep doing that. So I don't know if I'm really answering the question. I might be going off on a tangent, but yeah. So what I try to do is I try to support the family as much as possible, help them be more mindful and understanding what their values are, and
I would add, be blunt. So with our severely disabled son, I'd look at him when he's really. Mike describes his schizophrenia when he's having a really bad time, like he did a couple nights ago. He describes it this way. Years ago, he looked at me and he said, do you know those cotton candy machines at the fair that spin sugar around and make cotton candy? He said, my brain is one of those, but instead of sugar, it's glass that is in the machine spinning around. And that really helped me. I could understand the pain he's feeling when his brain's not working right. But because of that, my tendency was to take everything and never correct and all that, which is wise and fine. But I've learned to be very blunt and to look at him sometimes and say, you have got to take care of your caregivers. If you don't take care of me, then I can't take care of you. So while you're in the middle of this fit, just keep that in mind. You beat me down too badly, and I'm not going to be there in a few hours when you need me. And probably the first, few 700 times I said that, it didn't really register, but it has more and more over the years. So I think that gets to the question. Be blunt. You need to add? Not to that one.
I did have one thing to say. What? I think going back to if you do have a mental health disorder, what I've tried to do is really equip my clients to understand it and be able to speak about it and say what it is, and for them to realize not to be a victim to it, for it to define you, but it's also something that you're living with. And if you can't be prepared to give someone an answer for what you're dealing with, I think that's so important, so that you're not caught off guard, so that when someone is hurting or triggering or asks kind of that insensitive question, you can be more prepared to give grace and educate them and talk to them in a less defensive way, but just to help inform. And I think that's how that change can happen.
Very good. Okay, here's one that's interesting. Any one of you could answer this one. How do you explain to younger siblings, that's what's on the card, but I'll even say to older siblings, any siblings, the mental health of their sibling that might have some struggles?
Go ahead, Tammy. That's hard.
It's hard. I work with adults with mental illness, not the kids. You would have to get age-appropriate level. I mean, there's a way to describe everything without glossing over it or making it something it's not. Even with, say, schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a complicated illness and hard for people to understand because it has such broad symptoms, and the symptoms are so strange. Hearing voices, seeing things that aren't there, believing stuff that isn't true. But you can still explain that to kids in whatever, depending how old they are, whatever language they need to hear. And they understand illness. If something's physically wrong with the body, it's not that somebody is just playing make-believe, because we do that sometimes. But it's a physical illness. Something isn't right with the body. Medication usually helps, these kind of things. So to break it down and make it as just simple as possible, but still honest, because kids know when you're not being honest, and babies don't come from the stork.
Yeah,
so
that's good. Yeah.
I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
So I had a sibling too that suffered from mental illness, and I think growing up, and kids are resilient, all they know is what they know. And so I think to some extent you're just growing up with it and it's normal to you. But I think what was so important to me was realize that I was having a lot of feelings that were in response to what was happening because it wasn't healthy. And I think it could be really damaging if it's not explained, because your feelings need to be validated and to understand, hey, it makes sense that you're angry, it makes sense that this is happening, because we all have needs that need to be met. And especially if there's a social norm out there for what it means to have a sister, right? I'd hear stories of my friends' sisters, and it was completely different than my experience. And I think it was really helpful. It was actually her counselor that told my mom at the time, but later told me, I mean, you have to realize that you can't look at her, not that I'm saying she wasn't normal, but there was something there she wasn't able to give me. She was not able to engage with me the same way my friends' sisters were. And I think that was really helpful for me to understand and not put those expectations on her, and it allowed me to show more grace.
Let's, on behalf of Scott Woods, he's a psychiatrist that I really respect, and he wanted to be here, but he wanted further to keep his family's vacation. So so they are skiing instead.
How dare him?
Yeah, I know. I concur. At this point, Scott would say that one of the reasons that reputable psychiatrists will not diagnose with many disorders, particularly ones that develop later in life, the reason that they will not give you a diagnosis, which makes this question much harder to answer, is because it's not medically appropriate. When the brain is still changing and developing, especially through puberty, labeling somebody can be very, very detrimental. And when she said earlier, you don't let it define you, that's very hard to do when you're 15. It's a little easier to handle when you're 21. And so when you want to find words to put it, sometimes as a caregiver, especially parents, you will push to define something and say, oh, it must be this. I read it on the internet. And Dr. Woods would, I think, I'll speak on his behalf, right? He would deeply encourage you not to do that. Certainly go see a psychiatrist, that's great. Do the hard work, but be comfortable, if you can be comfortable, it's not comfortable. Be as comfortable as you can without having a direct answer for a little while. Does that make sense? Yeah, be careful.
Yeah, Jason, in your work, I imagine as a behavioral analyst, you deal with this a lot as well with the parents and siblings.
Yeah, definitely. We think that the siblings are definitely going to be part of the whole intervention, because once the parents get too old to care for the kids, who's going to step into their place, right? More than likely, it's going to be the kids. And so we definitely want to make them part of the intervention as soon as possible, or as soon as they're able to. So the earlier, the better, for sure.
Wonderful. Okay, so. What advice, again, I'll open this up to all four of you, whoever would like to answer. What advice would you give, and what resources would you recommend for parents who are struggling with coming to terms with their child's situation?
I would encourage them to seek out resources. I don't know if everybody knows about NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. We do have some stuff back there. NAMI is a support that was developed for family members, parents, other family members of individuals struggling with mental illness. So I think it's important that they seek out support from other people that are dealing with similar issues, because it's nice to not feel alone and like everything's on your shoulders and you're the only one experiencing this. Definitely support. I had another thought and it's gone. I can only hold one thought at a time. Probably ADD.
That's way ahead of most of us. I know. We can't even hold one. I would add this: let people help you. Don't try to shoulder it. There's a couple of people that are here tonight that probably are here, at least partly why they're here, is because they have been an incredible help to me. 9 years ago, when our doctor pulled me aside, our family doctor pulled Jana and I into his office after meeting with our son, and he said, I would give just about anything to not tell you what I'm about to tell you. And from that moment on, we were trying to deal with medication and adjustment, and many, many times we came very close to losing our son, and yet by God's grace, he has prospered and started this foundation and has really praised God, and we're very thankful. But every day is a battle, and these people kindly help. Let them help you. I remember when a friend of ours pressed upon me to go ahead and, for the long-term care of the kid, not because of need now, go ahead and contact Social Security about being declared disabled. And so I filled out the paperwork, and I had been told this takes a long time, months and months and months. It was less than 3 weeks later, I get a phone call. This is so-and-so from the Social Security Administration. And I said, oh. And she said, are you all right, sir? And I said, well, I thought it was going to be a long time till you got back. And there was this silence. And then the lady said, sir, your son is very, very ill. She was so sweet. I just cried with her on the phone, and she was so helpful. I know, it's just terrible, isn't it? We're going to do all we can. I mean, people really will help if you'll let them help. So let people help.
Very good. Jason, did you have a thought on that? You grabbed the microphone. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, actually it was handed to me, but I'll take it. I'll take it if someone hands it to me. But so I subscribe to acceptance and commitment therapy. I don't know if you guys know about ACT a lot. It's kind of a 180 from what Western psychology normally does. It's all about, you have all of these problems with you. You got to get rid of them because you have these problems. It's bad. You don't want them. So I'm not saying that's the wrong way at all, but there's a very different view. So Eastern psychology is all about accepting that, hey, life sucks, okay? Life will always suck. There's nothing you can do about it. And so you can either spend all of this time trying to fight all of these unhelpful thoughts, or you can start going with your values and start heading and making value-based decisions that lead you towards your values. You know what I'm talking about. You're nodding a lot right now. So, but yeah, so it's really all just about accepting that, everybody experiences pain. Everybody experiences suffering. Everyone experiences loss. If you feel like you're the only one, here's a secret, you're wrong. You're not the only one, okay? So it's all when we just accept that there's a lot of suck in life, okay? A lot. And it's all about how you deal with it. And you're always gonna have thoughts inside your head. It's just really important not to get tangled up in all of these thoughts and just lead or do behaviors that lead you towards your values. I mean, we can talk about values later. That's motivation.
That answer is a great segue to this next. It's more of a statement than a question, but I'm going to paraphrase it as a question. And what I would like to do is, Jillissa, if you would address this first before Wayne does, because I know already how Wayne is going to answer. So let's start with Jillissa, and then Wayne, I know you're going to have to have something to say.
It feels
about
like it's setting me up for.
No, because I know it was based on probably your response to another question. So to paraphrase, okay, I'm hearing take care of self first. But shouldn't I take it all to God first? Okay, so we're talking about, again, it's this ordo, right, how we operate, which, again, I know there's a lot of clarity to be had here. So serving God, and won't he give you the strength if you serve God? We're a little uncomfortable with the idea of self first. We should care for ourselves, yes, but we should place our faith in our circumstances above that. So the reason I thought that would be a great follow-up to Jason's answer is because that's exactly, in my own theology, I'm giving a little bit of my opinion into this because I have a microphone. Our theology, the depravity of man, the fallen state of the world, yeah. So how do we learn to cope with that? Well, of course, I think fundamentally, and here I'm answering the question myself. So, again, I got the microphone. We do have this foundation. For the purposes of this discussion, and I do want you guys to clarify this as well, we kind of already acknowledge that. Yes, that's step one, but then from there, it's kind of like the whole thing. Pray as if it all depends on God, work as if it all depends on you, because it does both. So at that, I'll go ahead and give it over to you guys.
I just would speak two things. In seminary, we learn, think of the cross. So you have certain needs that God is going to meet, and you need to go to him and realize what he's going to help you with. And then when you think of the other side, that's the horizontal and thinking of other people and how to depend on them. I think that's always helped with either codependency or trying to depend on other people outside of God. It helps to know kind of who to go to first. So I don't know if that totally answers it, but then I think of the serenity prayer too, which everyone's familiar with, but just having the serenity to accept the things that you cannot change and the wisdom, to let go of the things or to deal with the things that you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I think that's how I would answer that.
The word most often translated pray in the New Testament is a fascinating word. It just means to ask. That's all it means. So God tells in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray without ceasing. Literally it says ask without ceasing. So it's a little bit of I understand where the question is coming from. It's a good question, but it's a little bit of a misnomer, because if you're a believer in Christ, that is how you care for yourself. You're always asking without ceasing. Of course that's first. It's not first, it's first, last, in between, everything. That is part of what you're doing all the time. But as the Lord empowers you to care first for other people with your heart, it is a fairly decent summary of Scripture. It's not perfect, but God, others, self. It's not bad. But what we're talking about is you cannot achieve that care for others unless you have something to offer. So you're going to the Lord so that you can be empowered, so that you have something to offer. It's not selfishness. Selfishness is different, and we all struggle with that too. If you have mentally ill people in your life, you've looked up and had nights where you've said, well, what everybody else, why can't all the nonsense, can anybody else relate? I'm the only one. Anyway, and you realize what a selfish jerk I am. I really just want this to go away. Instead of, I want to go to the Lord, be empowered so that I can serve this person. Yeah.
Okay, here's a specific one. All right, so again, I'm going to try to paraphrase just for clarity. Wayne, I'll share this like kind of as a personal example. So you and I, going back several years, Wayne and Jenna, I hope you don't mind me sharing some personal stuff. So what they did, they had a date night, and it was a Tuesday night, and Wayne and Jenna had several friends surrounding them that would spend time with Michael just to hang out with him, just to make sure that he didn't have to spend too much time alone. So during that time, they were able to go and have the freedom knowing that Michael was going to be just fine with whomever he happened to be with that evening. So here's the question is, when you walk back into the struggle after taking a break, okay, and you had somebody who was this surrogate caregiver during that time. You come back and everything basically explodes on that person. That person could have dealt with whatever issue they were dealing with the surrogate caregiver, but instead you come home and whatever the issue is, all of a sudden everything, the full force of it is on you, and here you thought you were going to take a break, but you're right back into the fight. How do you cope with that?
First of all, because you let people help you, it is a rich blessing, and you're not letting them help you just for you. You're letting them help you because the person that you care for needs the interaction of other people. If they're particularly severely mentally ill, or if they're developmentally severe, like severe autism, your pool is limited because they don't trust very many people. But you can do that. And so it is a blessing even if you come back to hell. Because it's good for that for your person you care for. It really is. That said, I did sometimes have to lock the doors so that Jana couldn't jump out of the van on our way back from the movie or whatever, because I'm kidding. She wouldn't really have done that. She'd have made me stop first. But it is hard, and there's anybody who says otherwise is selling something. For our son, one of the difficulties of schizophrenia is a mania that will sometimes wed itself with narcissism and produce basically an antichrist as a child. I mean, it's really ugly. And so we would come home to a guy who was so fine because he wanted to be fine because he really liked Alex. Alex was one of the guys that would be with Mike on Tuesday nights, and he always really enjoyed Alex. He wanted to be really good for Alex. He was really calm, and then because he wanted to be really good, he's holding it in. Alex walks out the door, "Hey, see ya," and then he's like, "I know everything. I'm the king of the world," whatever the schizophrenic nonsense is, right? And it's okay. It's going to happen. It didn't always happen. Actually, it didn't happen very often when you were there. It really, I don't know what you gave him or anybody, but it was really useful, and it is still the right thing to do. Please don't misunderstand this. Going out is not like punishment, but when your 2-year-old is being rebellious and you punish that 2-year-old however you think is best. I happen to think scripturally spankings are a very narrow window. You only use them for rebellion. That's what I see in the scripture. So 2-year-olds rebelling, and in our home, that was a spanking if it was clear rebellion. We had one 2-year-old that liked spankings. Kid, she was crazy. But anyway, not really. She's not our crazy one. But they didn't mind them. They're still the right thing to do, right? Because the kid needed to learn this is not there. Same thing with going on the date night. You don't do it because you get a break, although that's wonderful. You do it because it's the right thing to do.
Anybody else?
That was I really enjoyed what you said there. Just speaking from a behavioral standpoint, so what we would do is we'd find out everybody does a behavior for a specific reason. Everything isn't willy-nilly, right? Everything happens for a reason, really. And so what we would do is, for the tantrum, there's a reason why the kid is throwing the tantrum. So unfortunately, our society is pretty much controlled by coercion and punishment. I hate to say it, we have laws and rules. Rarely ever does anybody ever stop me and say, "Hey, good job, Jason, for driving 45 in a 45. You rock." That'd be great. I would love that. But I never drive 45 in a 45 anyways. so I haven't exhibited the right behavior yet. Exactly. Always obey the speed limit. That wasn't a joke. Being serious. All right. Anyways, but yeah. So we find out why the behavior is occurring, and so yeah, I think there's place for punishment or spankings, whatever. I would never put that in a treatment plan, but the punishment doesn't address the issue of why the behavior is occurring in the first place. So yeah, what we try to do is find out why the behavior is occurring, and then we try to replace it with something that's functionally similar. So are they crying because they want access to something? Teach them an appropriate way to get access to the item. Do they want to escape an aversive situation? Teach them an appropriate way to escape the situation. But don't get me wrong, I'm saying there's definitely a place for coercion and punishment in the world, but we could be doing better by reinforcing behaviors that we want to see as well.
Cool, thank you.
On that, I think that's key, what just happened here. So you have a parent and the parent experience, and we have a professional, ABA, behavioral analysis. It's a great service, but I think everybody doesn't even know it exists and know that their lives can get better because of it. And so I think one thing parents can do is, one, talk to other parents, find out what's out there, and keep finding out what's out there, because the ABA hasn't always been around. It's fairly new in my experience as far as it being. Okay, so it's not out there. People are still hearing about it and hearing how beneficial it can be, and that's something that could help parents not having to suffer all the time. Things can get better. There's something called recovery, whether it's for autism or mental health. Things can get better. You can be on a pretty stable road, you can always have relapses, but it can be a pretty stable road.
And the reinforcement is critical. You're exactly right. I cannot think of a single day in the last probably 7 years that I haven't at some point said to my son, hey, that was well done. You managed that well, because he does. He fights hard and does well. And you can do that for each other, right? So Kirsty and I care for people we care about, and I texted her yesterday and said, boy, you did this really well. And when you guys are talking to your friends and your life group, when you let people in your life about the struggles you have, telling each other don't lie. If they're speeding, don't say, good job driving 45. But when they manage it well, that encouragement's powerful.
So here's a twist as you continue, Jason. I saw you grab the mic. I know. Here's a twist. Let's say it's not a child. Let's say it's a spouse.
Right. Or
How is that any different?
No, actually, behavior is behavior. A lot of people think, ABA, it's that thing for children with autism. It's a very common misconception. ABA is just a study of behaviors, why organisms do what they do. I can explain, finally, the crazy crap that I do all the time, by studying my own behavior. But yeah, it's just all about observing objective behaviors. I love the mentalistic side of psychology. There's, we always work in collaboration with each other. But the field of ABA is specifically on observable behaviors. What can we see? On Monday, they exhibited 8 minutes of tantrum behavior. On Tuesday, it was 3.5. So we can say objectively that we have some control over the behavior. So I don't want people to think that ABA is just that ABA or the autism thing. It's explaining why we do all the crazy crap that we do. And it's extremely interesting, as you could tell. I say crap a lot when I'm interested. Thank you.
Well, that's better than some alternative words.
Mindfulness.
Okay, Jillissa, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to add, I think I study a lot of attachment theory, and so understanding how we love. I think there's a really great book by Milan and Kay Yurkovich called How We Love, but I think it helps you understand what your feelings are. They've got a really great resource, so you can email me. There's a lot of information on the back table, but they have this awareness journal, and it's, okay, what's the situation? What is it that I feel? What am I feeling and experiencing in my body? What does that feeling mean? And you just go deeper and deeper and deeper. What kind of beliefs is, so I think that's really helpful. I think with the marriage relationship especially, and then with kids too, I think it's very much helping them understand what their need is, being able to see through too when, I don't know, if it's for attention, if they're upset with you for some reason, some kind of attachment issue or insecurity there too. But I think that can be really helpful for them. But I think if it's the latter, that you are setting and forming appropriate boundaries too, because I think it's really easy as a caregiver to feel, a guilt, a need to give in every time, or to always be the savior, the one helping, the one. So I'd be cautious of that, and don't be afraid to ask for help and get help from others.
Cool. So Tammy, with LifePath since 1995, two-part question. I'm sure we have seen stigma about mental illness in society change over the years. How can we continue to fight the stigmas that exist? And discuss just like what have you seen that has been successful and what has not been so successful?
I think there's been a lot of public health efforts. It's okay not to be okay. There's different things we're hearing on the radio and stuff. Over 25 years, I've seen a huge shift. It was difficult to, like the whole parent thing and telling your parent, I've got bad news. It's not bad news anymore. Schizophrenia doesn't have to be the end of the world. And so I think there's been a shift both within the career field or whatever about how we see illnesses. And then we've been trying to communicate that to the public, and it's catching on. There's still lots of stigma, and some people, especially with kids, a lot of people tend to blame the parents. We hear that a lot, that parents are afraid of things like this, where they stand up and say, I have a kid with this problem. There's just so much judgment that we do that our neighborhood's better than that, and we don't have those problems. We've got to keep talking about it, and we've got to keep making sure people understand that recovery is possible. It's not it's not a life sentence of misery and agony anymore. More of even schizophrenia, if we detect it, the sooner we can detect it, the sooner we can do the right treatments, and the less problems it's going to cause later on. It doesn't have to be as debilitating as it used to be back 30, 40 years ago when the medications were more limited and people would stop and start them and go in and out of hospitals. If we found that if we target certain treatments to younger kids when it first comes out, 15 to 30 is that age range for schizophrenia, we have much better outcomes. And so sharing that information so people know mental health doesn't mean that you're abnormal. Just because you have bipolar doesn't mean the rest of your life is going to be miserable and you can't get married and you can't have kids. Because people used to think that. People still think that. I still run across people today that are terrified when they find out that they've got this illness. And the first thing you have to do is break that down, that it's not that bad. It's okay. Everybody breathe. And you can have a good life. You can get married. You can have kids. You can be the president. You can do whatever you want. And so we have to keep spreading that message. And so it comes out in those things like it's okay to be okay. I think there's others that I'm forgetting. The easier way we put it on things, the more we say it and the more we talk about it. Most of us probably know somebody that has had a mental illness or substance abuse because it's common. Depression's very common. Anxiety's common. And drinking alcohol when things don't go well is common. And so it shouldn't be something we hide because we all probably know somebody, family member, friend, church fellow, you know somebody. We are everywhere. So don't be ashamed to say what's going on.
Yeah, good. Cool.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say also that anxiety and depression, a lot of people talk about that a lot. Has anybody here, by a show of hands, never experienced any type of anxiety or depression or anything like that in their life? I'd be so surprised if someone raised their hand right now. Because, yeah, and that's the thing, it's a natural response. Your body is responding to environmental factors. And so it's when it starts to really take over your life, that's when it's an issue. So we all we've all felt these things before, and so I think that can kind of help us understand a little bit more for people who are really suffering from it.
Jillissa, marriage and family is a hot button for you. Here's a tough one, okay, for all four of you. So here you go. Jillissa, lead off on this, mainly because of marriage and family. All right, what do you do when you really believe your child needs help, but your spouse is not only ignoring the problem, but thinks maybe you actually want that child to remain in that state of illness, whatever that looks like?
You have fun with that.
That's such a hard one. I mean, it just is.
I'm sure you've seen this before.
Oh, all the time. I think, yeah, having that congruence as a couple is difficult. I mean, honestly, the biggest thing I would suggest is if they're willing, which is a big if, right? I mean, that's the big question, but to try to come to counseling, try to come where there can be a mediator to listen to both. And sometimes I think it's helpful to have insight and direction not coming from you directly, right? Especially if they've shut down or there's a lot of hostility or resentment that's built up. So trying to get involved in church, counselors, pastor, other people telling them that message. So I think that can kind of be an indirect way to deal with it.
Sometimes the why actually makes it a lot easier than it seems. When you can finally get to the why is spouse A thinking that we have this problem? And by the way, spouse A may not be right. That's what they think. And spouse B is convinced, no, we don't have that problem and it's all in your head. One of the things that a counselor can do or a pastor can do is help get to why do you think what you think? A lot of times, what we've experienced in the church is that a lot of times spouse A is correct. There does seem to be some kind of problem. Spouse B is adamant there's not a problem, not because they're afraid of mental illness, but because they think that they're going to go down a rabbit hole where this kid will never be treated, as Tammy said, as somebody who can be productive. And so they're just terrified. So when they come out with and say, well, I don't want a life sentence for the kid, and then the professional is able to say, that's not a life sentence. So So I'm looking at my friend over here who has an autistic kiddo, really, really tough situation. This kid has not only done well and has flourished and is going to the most prestigious, he wants to be a meteorologist, going to the most prestigious meteorological college in the country, that's number one, on a full scholarship. Actually is making money. They're paying him a stipend, which I'd like to be his agent, by the way, to go to college. And this is, so it's not, when you do what they did and you embrace that and you learn from it and you grow, Tammy's right, that's not a life sentence. But I have found most of the time that's what causes spouse B to not want to admit it. So getting to the why, and a pro helps with that a lot.
So here's a follow-up question to an earlier question. So as a parent of a child diagnosed with autism, there is the grieving that comes with learning about a diagnosis like that. In your experience, any one of you can answer this, probably you two that deal with autistic children most frequently. In your experience, do siblings of the autistic child experience the same level of grief, even if silently? And how do you talk with your other kids? We addressed that a little bit, to help them understand that their siblings' autism and make sure they're emotionally okay.
Actually, you might hate me for this. Can we jump back to the other question? I wasn't fast enough to jump in and interject.
Yeah, that's okay.
But so what I would do is I would find, it's all about values, right? So you find out what both parent A and parent B, what are their values? Like, do they want their son to live, or son or daughter, excuse me, to live like the most independent, enriched life possible? Do they want them to become just like an awesome musician and whatnot? And so then you take it into scientific mode, right? And so you say, all right, so the individual is engaging in all these SIBs, or self-interest behaviors. They're tantruming, they're crying, they're exhibiting aggression. Will that help the individual out long-term in the future? And I would even take like objective data and say, hey, you know what? Our son or daughter engaging in 100 instances of SIB or self-interest behaviors, per day, that's probably not the best for their health. And so I'm sure having a healthy son or daughter is, I guess, one of the, hopefully, the values and goals that you have for them. And so you can come to an agreement that, hey, these behaviors, they're not helping them. And so, and it's not getting better, it might even be getting worse. So then you can both agree on that and move forward and try to do that.
Cool, yeah, that's great. By the way, I just want to make a quick announcement. If anybody else has other questions, we've pretty much got, I would like to get to everyone's questions that I currently have. In order to do so in the interest of time, simply because we definitely want to be respectful of people's time. So when we say we're going to be finished by 7:30, we're going to be finished. And I would definitely want to leave enough time to answer these last few questions. So if you have questions that you have thought of, you just haven't bothered to write it down yet, you haven't raised your hand and you have one, please keep in mind that this is an ongoing dialogue. This is not the end after tonight. You can contact us. You can contact our panel. We all are easy to get a hold of and follow up with. So please feel free, like at the end of our tonight's session, that's not the end. And we will be doing this again, as I said, probably in the fall. So just want to make sure that you all know that. So sorry, questions are closed. So we'll continue. So now, do I need to repeat the last question? Probably. So about if,
yes.
so if my child has been diagnosed with autism, there's a grieving process. Do their siblings grieve as well? And if so, like, how do we help the siblings deal with this emotionally? And it's similar to the question we had earlier about how do you explain to the siblings?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about before about the whole understanding. How can you break it down for the sibling to really help them understand in the best way of what's going on? I think sometimes parents don't even know 100% of what's going on as well. So knowledge is power. I'm going to end on that.
I think this is true not just for siblings, but it's an excellent question, and it's true for all of the extended family. So, so you'll tend to see two reactions, and often in the same person. So the kiddo gets diagnosed with some mental issue, and the grandfather will say to you the next time you see him, "Man, I'm so glad to know that, because that kid's been crazy for a long time, and I didn't know what was wrong." But then also the grandfather looks at you and goes, golly, but I'm just so sad. I'm just aching for him. And how do you help grandpa do that? And it's even more intense with a sibling. So you got to grow up with a brother who's mentally ill. And what happens is you've got to avoid all the things you know to avoid. You can't become a codependent situation. You can't excuse sin. But within, I refuse to excuse sin, and we're not going to but we're also not going to wallow in horror. In between there is a very wide playing field that, quite frankly, is a biblical playing field where everybody can grieve. And biblical grieving, if you're a Christian, grieving is actually a wonderful thing, because every single one of the grieving psalms ends on what? A beautiful high note. It is impossible for a person who believes in a resurrection and a perfect life to come to grieve honestly and not end up really excited. It's just impossible. And what's weird is we try to jump to the excited part and we don't get there because we're playing games. We have to go through the grief. So just letting that wide playing field of letting the kid act out, again, not excusing sin, but letting the sibling act out, letting the grandfather be unhappy, whatever, so they can work through the grief. And they will end up in that positive place. They really will. You just got to give them time.
I'd love to add to that too. Going back to the attachment theory, every kid is different and learns to be different with how they're engaging with their parent and with this kind of problem type situation. And so I think it's really important. Again, I'm going to cite How We Love is a really great resource, but they go through different attachment styles: the avoider, the pleaser, the vacillator, the controller, and the victim. And so if you as a parent are more of an avoider style and not engaging with your child, they're going to have an avoider type style too. And I see this all the time of parents that come in, right, and they're telling me, that we got a divorce, this happened, that our son got a diagnosis, something like that, and it seems like the kids are fine, they're great, they're not saying anything. And I think kids typically tend to be a little bit more resilient, just by nature. But I think that's important to understand. Is your child really okay? How are you engaging with them to understand that? And they ask the comfort question, basically, how are you comforting them? So in their grief, they basically say that the 3 elements of comfort are touch, listening and drawing them out, and then providing some sort of relief, right? It's not fixing it. It's not sympathizing from up here. It's getting down on that level and really comforting. So I think that's important as you're understanding how your child's grieving. And that book might be able to help you discern how your child's reacting to it as well.
Yeah. Although they left out ice cream.
So 3 more questions if we can get through them. This is kind of a practical one. What are healthy ways to help your loved one to decompress during a time of mania? Anyone?
It's actually the same as with any kiddo. When you've raised kids, there are times when you've had it. Jana and I, any of you ever rock climbed or rappelled? Okay, there's an official thing you say. It's actually a legal contract. When you're going to start rappelling, you look at the person who is your belayer, and you say, what? Anybody know? On belay. And they say, belay on. And they're saying, I have got you. And we learned very early on that when a child, not talking about middle struggles, just life, when a child was driving one of us nuts, we would hear from the other part of the house, on belay! On belay! And we would, belay on! I'm coming, belay on. And that is why it is critically important to fight for your marriage. You said you want to be other-centered, yes, and you pray first, and all that's true, but part of making sure, kind of like dealing with yourself, part of making sure that you're in a position to care is you keep that marriage strong. You've got to fight for your marriage. The level of divorce is ridiculous among people who deal with mental illness in their family. It's horrifying. And the numbers are staggering. It's upward of 65%. So we want to fight for the marriage. And one of the best ways to do it is when one of them is strained, the other one says, and sometimes it's not even me recognizing I'm strained. Dealing with an adult, a wonderful, brilliant adult son of mine, I sometimes won't even realize I'm caught in a cycle and I'm not doing well with him. And Jana will look up and go, belay on? which is a nice hint to say, get out of the room, you're not helping. And so on belay, let's all practice. I'll say on belay, you say belay on. On belay? If you're a single parent and you are a single caregiver for a parent who is disabled and you are the only sibling that's dealing with them, then you need to find somebody else who really, and God will provide, somebody that really loves you and loves them, so you have a belayer. You need a belayer.
I'd add to just the connection and the relationship, because, right, it really depends on the state of your relationship, whether you're coming across as nagging, asking too much, saying you need count, whatever way you're trying to help might not be helping depending on the relationship. And so I think it's really important that you have open and good communication, right? That you're checking in with each other, seeing how they're doing. Again, kind of practicing that active listening, speaker roles, and then being able to comfort and listen. But I think validating, comforting, listening before you give advice of how to fix it or handle it could be really helpful too.
Jillissa, keep the microphone. We'll probably start with you on this one too.
Sorry.
And for everybody. No, it's okay. No, because I'm sure you're going to want to chime in on this. So this is a little bit of a tough one as well. And I'm sure this is probably a great question for everybody in here. Someone's going to say, oh, I'm so glad somebody else asked that. How do you handle care and support of someone who wants to wallow in their diagnosis? What is the balance of caring for a need, such as schizophrenia or depression or bipolar, and practicing tough love?
I usually tell my clients it's a practice of two different things, of acceptance and realizing what it is and coping with the grief, right? Grieving the loss as you understand what this is like for you. So I do a lot of listening and processing. But then the next step is not just staying in that, right? What action can you take? How can you help yourself? So I think that's a quick and easy answer, but validating, trying to help them understand, but also pointing them to what they can do. And I think to all of y'all's points of, how active they can be in society, how successful they can be, all of that is so important to help encourage them to get out of that kind of victim mentality, if you will.
So I'll tag on to that. Recovery is an active thing. Recovery doesn't just happen to you, where you can just wallow and I'm so depressed and can't wait for my recovery to happen. You've got to make sure that they understand that it's their job. Just like my job's taking care of my health and whatever burdens I have, whatever, it's our job is to manage ourselves. It's nobody else's job to manage us and us just be passive. And so that works with a good counselor, a good skills trainer. We have different types of people at LifePath that work with them, teaching them skills on how they can manage their own illness, how can they recognize when they are becoming manic or becoming depressed, and how to cope with that. What different things. You need lots of tools in your toolbox, and it's their tools to handle themselves. We are not to run around behind somebody and take care of them from birth till death. You got to take care of yourself, and that's for all of us. And so I would encourage that you get those types of services so that person can get the tools they need for their toolbox to work towards their recovery.
The Rose back there, she who brought all the good cookies, Rose volunteered for some time at Cornerstone Ranch, which is developmentally severely disabled adults. And you don't go out there and see a bunch of vegetables who are lying around wallowing. You see people who have been trained and who have embraced the opportunity to develop their lives with an understanding, and it has to be so difficult, an understanding that their target is different than everybody else's, but it's still a target, and they are working toward it. And it's, Rose, one of the most encouraging places you go, right? It's very uplifting. And those are folks whose toolbox is very limited, and they flourish. So teaching ourselves, teaching those that we love that you are going to, as a Christian, our way we put it, you are going to praise God with this. This is going to be a manifestation of the Lord. Doesn't mean there's a wide field. We're not going to help you sin. We are going to grieve with you, but we're not going to let you wallow, and or at least help you wallow. And in there is real health. And we've been very blessed in that God has empowered our son, and he has flourished And it doesn't mean every day is not a fight. It is. But he has flourished in that, and it's very encouraging to see. It can happen. I'll tell a story about him that he won't mind. 9 months ago, Mike looked up, and it was a wallowing moment. And those are okay. Everybody has down days, and it's fine. It wasn't. But he was really, I want to be married. I'm a very loving guy. Yes, you are. And we talked about his character. He's an incredibly giving, sheltering, caring person. And he said, no girl wants this damaged goods. That nobody wants to grow old with this. And just let him talk. But when he brought it up the next day, what do you think his mom said? Oh, I forgot you're God. That's right. You know everything. Oh, we better just put you on the throne now. She was rough on him. Look, buddy, it's okay to be sad, but this is absurd. You don't know that. One of the greatest things I've ever seen was when Mike got engaged a few weeks ago to an incredible young lady who is excited about growing up in Christ and growing old with this guy. And they got a lot of work to do, but it's absolutely beautiful. His mother did not go running into his house and say, oh, look who knows so much, I told you. She did not do the I told you so. Although the statute of limitations hasn't expired, it still may come. The point is, you let the person be sad, that's fine, that's grieving, but when it comes to wallowing is when they stay there. Does that make sense? And then you can rejoice when God provides the impossible.
I just quickly want to add to that. I know this seems so simple, but I work at the Hope Center under the umbrella of Hope for the Heart at HopeWorks Counseling, and I think there's really something to that word of feeling hope, and I think that's what everyone's talking about. But there's so many scriptures that hope gives us faith and encouragement. And I had a really great client that I don't think they'd mind if I quoted them, but they were suffering from depression and various things, and they said, you know what, I have this, I'm always probably going to have it, but I want to fight for it. I want to fight against it. And I'd rather fight every day of my life than give in to it. And I think that's that helpful mentality to help them fight, help them keep going. And I think that's really great.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Any final thoughts from any of you? We really need to wrap it up, so I'm going to save the last question, which incidentally did not come from our audience here tonight, although it's a pretty good one. So guess why I'm saying that? It's a cliffhanger. So you have to come the next time we do this. So you have to come. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for the Fundamental Arts Foundation website and our Facebook page for the next time we hold a forum like this. Any last thoughts before we close?
These guys all brought information. If their work can be of use to you or other people, there's a whole lot of data back there. A friend of ours who works with a legal foundation that she was a judge for 25 years and is retired, and she couldn't be here tonight, but she has some info back there about the Texas Legal Fund, which can help with, there are often legal aspects to this, and they are glad to help. A lot of it's pro bono. She, for some reason, only gave us one brochure of each type, so take photos of it and then order your own. And remember, always, 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 Mike couldn't be here. It was terrifying to him to be here in front of a bunch of people, but he wanted me to say, AJ or I wanted one of us to say, please, if you know people that have any kind of mental issue at all, and they are making art, and they often do, of different kinds, music, whatever, any kind of art, that's why we exist, to give them a voice. And the Fundamental Arts Foundation website we will highlight them, their stuff will be out there, and the stories we have of people who were feeling very, very rough and fighting through their situation, and then they saw all these people liking their stuff on the website around the world, it's a big deal. If you have somebody in your life that has a mental issue and has never tried art, that's what we raise our money for. Mm-hmm. We give them art supplies. We'll even get them art instruction. Let's get them opportunity. Mike is convinced that he would not have been able to fight this fight as effectively if he hadn't had art to go to.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt you, Wayne.
Yeah, no.
We have a merch table, and all the proceeds go to the Fundamental Arts Foundation.
There you go. Well done. That was good. And all the cookies should be eaten,
Yes, absolutely.
And since AJ is a pastor, he's not comfortable closing a meeting without prayer. I apologize, but go ahead, AJ. He wants to pray. Go
I
ahead.
sure will. All right, let me do that. Lord, we just thank you for our evening. Thank you for our panelists and for all the wonderful people that came to share this night with us. We certainly appreciate all of the knowledge that you've given us in this room to help us deal with those people in our lives that we have the joy and the blessing to serve, Lord, who have been given a special gift to be loved in a special way and to love in a special way. And Lord, as we go from here, may we truly honor you in our efforts. May our words and our deeds bring you all the glory. In Jesus' name, amen. And please give our panel a huge hand. Great evening.